Now.
This meeting is recorded.
Perfect. So welcome everyone to our Net Zero Roadmap to Competitive Advantage webinar. In today's extraordinarily challenging economic and political context, where manufacturers are just coming out of a major pandemic, only to fall into an armed conflict at our doorstep, and where they are crippled with spiraling energy prices, never has it become clearer that we need to accelerate our path to sustainable energy independence. And to achieve that independence of supply and stability of prices, it's clear that this path has got to be one of sustainability towards low carbon energy. It's also important not to forget that the climate emergency has not disappeared and will directly impact businesses and the economy as a whole. We already know that the future will bring more of these public health and resource supply crises, and it's therefore essential to build resilience in our businesses. So Make UK has committed to help its members in their transition to net zero, and has developed in partnership with our experts from Inspired Energy, a roadmap to net zero for the manufacturing sector. Christina Beadle and Dan Holm will give you an overview today of the roadmap and help you see why it's important to get going early and how committing to net zero will support your business in gaining competitive advantage. Finally, we also indicate what support we can provide you when you embark on your own journey to net zero. You'll also hear directly from our members, Robert Pickard from BBC, Gavin Redhead from Astley Science, and Heather Nixon from BioD, who are already on their road to net zero. There'll be some stat polls through the session and opportunity to ask questions at our Q&A session. So with that, I'm going to start with a quick poll to see, to help us gauge where you, our audience, are at. So this is the poll on the screen. So I'll let you fill it in. Hopefully you can see it and it works. Right.
It seems to have slowed down.
I think we've stabilized, yes. So I don't know if Dan wants to comment, but I can see immediately that we have about 45% who people who said they have aligned or made a commitment aligned with our Make UK roadmap or with other association or trade bodies, roadmaps, or other bodies like B Corp, carbon neutral, etc. So that's really good news. But then, of course, there's also a third who have said no, but they're planning to this calendar year. So that's really good news as well, that you are thinking about it and planning. And then others who don't know where to start. And that's great, because that's why we're here to help you as well. And just a couple who have said no, and well, it will be interesting to hear your views later, perhaps in the Q&A. So, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't share the results. So here they were, but basically I have summarized them. I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add, but with that, yeah.
The results are pretty much as I would expect from speaking to a lot of the members and you know, broader business networks. Like you say, it'd be interesting to understand the couple that have voted no, whether that's you know, being an SME, you're not captured by any compliance that forces you to make any commitments or measure, or whether you're just that far up the supply chain that you've not yet seen any pressure from customers. But it would certainly be interesting to understand that position. And for the people who don't know how to start, you'll probably find out a bit more information, or hopefully later in today's session. And also we're covering what kind of resources Make UK and Inspired have available for those of you that need some guidance on where to start and how to make progress with that.
Right, so thank you. I'll stop sharing here. And I'm now going to hand over to Christina Beadle from Inspired Energy, who will take you through the roadmap.
Thanks,
Hopefully
Brigitte.
Yep,
and Dan, thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Christina Beadle, and I am Head of Carbon Services at Inspired Energy. And as has been discussed already, we've been working with Make UK to develop a roadmap for how the manufacturing sector can start to tackle net zero. The roadmap was officially published a few months ago, but today is our launch day. So if you haven't looked at it already, I highly encourage you to go to the Make UK website and have a look at the reports. It's long, but it's got a lot of useful information in it. What I'm going to do over the next 15 minutes or so are summarize some of the key findings of the report. So to start with, why did we do this report? So as hopefully most of you know, the UK government has set in law an ambition to be net zero by 2050. Make UK wanted to define a roadmap of how the manufacturing sector can align with this target and decarbonise to reach this net zero target. So the manufacturing sector will be hugely important to the UK achieving their target, because the manufacturing sector will enable so many of the decarbonisation technologies that the UK government is relying on to reach net zero. Also, manufacturing accounts for about 1/6 of the UK greenhouse gas emissions. Those are scope 1 direct emissions, and 1/3 if you were going to include their electricity usage. So decarbonising manufacturing will have a huge impact towards reducing the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, on the road to net zero, this means the manufacturing industry is actually going to have to reduce the absolute emissions that it is producing. So this can't be done on an intensity basis. The manufacturing industry needs to actually cut the absolute tons of CO2e that it is releasing. However, this is not a simple challenge. The manufacturing industry is one of the most complicated in the UK, and they're facing a threefold challenge when it comes to decarbonising. Firstly, the complexity of the organisations and supply chain mean that decarbonising full value chains is hugely complex and relies on the collaboration of a number of different entities. Further to this, manufacturing processes are very emissions intensive, either through the energy they consume or also through the raw materials. Therefore, weaning the manufacturing industry off fossil fuels is going to be a huge issue. And thirdly, the manufacturing industry needs to try and remain competitive against national competition, but also internationally. And the risk of carbon leakage, as UK manufacturers are targeted to reduce their emissions while other countries around the world aren't, is a huge challenge that the UK manufacturing industry needs to overcome. However, to break it down and to come up with our net zero roadmap, we had a 3-step approach to look at this. So the first part of our project, and this started last summer, was a scoping report. So this looked at all the material that was already out there available around net zero. So pulling into account any government papers, the Committee on Climate Change's report, looking at how the UK intends to reach net zero, and focusing in there, looking at what those reports are saying about how the manufacturing sector can decarbonise. As part of that scoping phase, we also looked at other sector roadmaps, so other sector body roadmaps and the way that they are mapping their pathway to net zero. Once we had this initial primary research, we then went out to the Make UK members and we did a number of different workshops. In these workshops, we wanted to test out how this proposed commitments felt to people, which we'll have a little look at the commitments in a minute. So did members think these commitments were achievable? And we also wanted to gather first-hand information around the key challenges and opportunities and what help the members need to reach net zero. What we've then done, and this is the final roadmap that's just been published, is we've combined all that. So the first-hand research around what's already been said by different industry bodies, by the government, what manufacturing companies in the UK are actually saying, and we've put this into a big net zero roadmap that tries to outline a pathway for how the manufacturing industry can get where they are today to a net zero state. So the key findings of our report, I said it's a bit long, so I've the full report, but I do insist or suggest you read it. But the key findings and the key commitments are shown here on the screen. So the headline numbers are that Make UK are encouraging their members to cut their emissions by 67% by 2035. And that's compared to a 2018 baseline. And that aligns with the UK government target to reduce emissions 78% compared to a 1990 baseline. So 67% in scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2035, and then eventually reaching net zero by 2050. To help on the way to those high-level commitments, Make UK have also established a number of supportive commitments. And these focus around different enablers, so different things that Make UK want to encourage to help the decarbonisation towards these targets. So take you through these briefly. The first commitment that Make UK is making is to help support the rollout of industrial clusters. So those are the big industrial clusters that the UK government have also highlighted as a key enabler of reaching the net zero target. But Make UK also want to help support decarbonised mini clusters at dispersed site. And they've identified that these dispersed sites will need additional help to decarbonise. Make UK have also identified that there will need to be significant support for suppliers and customers to go net zero, so reducing emissions across the entire value chain, so our scope 3 emissions of all manufacturers. And as part of that, Make UK wants to help its members and help the manufacturing industry to produce net zero products. So the British Retail Consortium have proposed that only net zero products should be sold in the UK from 2040 onwards, and Make UK acknowledges that commitment and wants to help the members contribute to it. Another commitment that will help reach ultimately a net zero target is the utilisation of carbon capture and storage where needed. And we'll talk about the balance between absolute reductions and carbon capture and storage in one of the later slides, but it is key, or it has been identified that CCUS will be needed for the UK and the manufacturing sector to reach net zero. And finally, what Make UK have identified as a key part of achieving these commitments is engaging with government and other stakeholders now, so that the business and regulatory environment is set up so that manufacturers can successfully decarbonise. So we realise there are challenges, there are opportunities, and the framework needs to be there to support manufacturers on their journey. So, targets that we've mentioned there, we haven't just pulled them out of the air. As I mentioned, they are based on the UK government targets. And when we put these commitments out and targets out to members in our workshops, we found overwhelming support for both the long-term target, so that net zero by 2050, and also the interim target of 67% reduction by 2035. You'll see there, it's interesting to note that the net zero by 2050 was wholeheartedly supported across the board, some with reservations, but it was a yes from everyone. Whereas it was identified that 67% reduction by 2035 could be very difficult for certain manufacturers in certain really hard to decarbonise businesses. And it was identified that there really needed to be a lot more government support to help these hard to decarbonise manufacturers reach those short-term reductions. In terms of some of the other challenges that were mentioned in the workshop, we discussed a lot around the key challenges that individual manufacturers are facing. We discussed sector-specific challenges. But what were the recurring themes that we've noticed across a lot of the sectors were these 4 key challenges. So firstly, decarbonising raw materials and the supply of raw materials was identified as what is going to be the main challenge when you're trying to reach net zero. So thinking about embedded carbon in the raw materials that you may use, or for example, the use of fossil fuels as a raw material. This was identified as going to be a real challenge to try and change long established processes. The next one down there is decarbonising fossil fuel intensive processes themselves. So manufacturers that use a lot of energy, it was identified that it would be a real challenge to decarbonise those energy intensive processes and switch to low carbon fuels. the infrastructure and the logistics around decarbonising the manufacturing sites was identified as a real problem that didn't yet have a viable solution for certain manufacturers. Decarbonising transport and logistics was also identified as a problem. Although there are low carbon transport options out there, on a manufacturing scale and on a commercial scale, thinking about low carbon HGVs, for example, the solutions still aren't available for everyone to roll that out. And that was also identified as a real challenge to manufacturers. And finally, staying cost competitive. So we heard again and again in our workshops the fact that companies would love to decarbonize, but it's costing too much. And on the margins that they're at the moment, they can't afford to decarbonize and stay profitable, especially when other countries who are not forcing their manufacturers to decarbonize and they're seeing customers offshoring their work, for example. So a few key challenges that were identified and that we talk about in more detail in the report. On the flip side of that, though, we did talk a lot about opportunities that are presented by the net zero transition. So as mentioned, manufacturing is going to be key to enabling the UK to decarbonise, either through the creation of renewable infrastructure, wind turbines, for example, EV batteries. But manufacturing is also going to be key to unlocking, for example, the hydrogen industry and for enabling CCUS. So as part of these opportunities presented by the wider society, there are some very specific opportunities for manufacturers that they can start to take advantage of on the journey to net zero. So developing new supply chains, unlocking new business areas as part of these new low carbon technologies will create new business for a lot of manufacturers. Additionally, there's going to be increased access to finance through lenders, investors, grants, funds, and we're seeing more and more investors looking for green investment opportunities. If decarbonising and improving your processes can lead to huge efficiencies, not only in process efficiencies, but also energy efficiencies, and especially at the moment, this can lead to cost savings. So there's huge cost savings and process efficiencies on this journey to net zero. There's also the potential to produce and innovate to develop new products, new green products, which can lead to new revenue streams. And finally, we are seeing that more and more people are attracted to a green business. So there is the chance to attract new workers to the manufacturing industry, and this could lead to increased innovation. So what does this all mean together when we put all of this on one slide? And this is our kind of key image from the roadmap report, looking at where the manufacturing is now. So the baseline year, we're seeing that the manufacturing industry produced 72 million tons CO2e in the baseline year, and seeing where the manufacturing industry needs to be. So in 2050, the manufacturing industry is aiming to be net zero. So the official definition of net zero is to reduce your absolute emissions as far as possible, and then to offset any residual hard to decarbonize emissions with carbon sequestration offsets. So that's that at least 90% reduction with 10% carbon removal. In terms of what is going to drive these emission reductions, in the short term, we're going to see new nuclear power coming on, we're going to see the kick up in hydrogen capacity, and we're going to start to see the rollout of low carbon clusters. And in the short term, these three different factors are going to help manufacturers decarbonize their electricity supply, but also start to think about other decarbonisation of industrial processes. In the medium term, we're going to see the growth in offshore wind as the UK aims to hit its offshore wind capacity in 2030. And again, this is going to help decarbonise the overall UK electricity grid, which will benefit manufacturers. 2030 is also going to be key for the rollout of low carbon clusters, both in industrial sites, but also in dispersed mini clusters. There are targets around that medium term to develop those clusters. And also in that medium term, so in the 2030 to 2040, we're going to see the phase out of internal combustion engine vehicles. So this is going to be, as we've mentioned, a huge challenge to manufacturers, but also opens up the opportunity for new supply chains, new revenue streams, new types of technology. And it's going to help, ultimately, manufacturers decarbonize their operations as new low carbon transport technologies come online. In the very long term, what's going to help manufacturers decarbonize is a move towards low carbon products. So I mentioned that British Retail Consortium's target to have net zero products sold in the UK by 2040. That will help manufacturers decarbonize their supply chain. Additionally, there are some other targets in the long term. So the phase out of high emission aviation. So as we go towards net zero aviation emissions, again, this is going to present opportunities for the manufacturing industry to help support aviation decarbonize and create new technologies, and will ultimately help manufacturers decarbonize their entire emissions footprint through, for example, business travel, if there is low carbon aviation available. So that the top side of this roadmap are the different targets that have been identified in government and other sector roadmaps. And these wider economy enablers will help help manufacturing achieve their commitments. On the flip side of that, what manufacturers can do internally to start to position their business for this low carbon decarbonisation journey is start to think about maximising energy, resource and material efficiencies. So starting to work out how you can save money and materials through more efficient processes. It'll be really important in the short to medium term for manufacturers to not lock in high carbon production methods that they're going to be tied to for decades to come. So something that manufacturers can be looking at now. Additionally, looking at in the short term, manufacturers should start to equip their workers with new skills to help enable them to effectively take advantage of the transition to new technologies. And a combination with this, the integration of new digital technologies and smart systems at manufacturing sites will not only contribute to that efficiency piece, but will also help improve when you're creating new technologies and looking at new greener products. In the more medium term, maximising heat recovery in high temperature sites, thinking about reusing energy will be key to help to cut energy usage and related emissions. And underpinning all of those pieces of internal work that manufacturers can be looking at is engagement with government, stakeholders, sector bodies to help make sure there's the right business and regulatory environment in place to start to implement some of these changes. Additionally, manufacturers will need to support their suppliers, so all the way down the supply chain to smaller SMEs and customers to help them decarbonise. So we are seeing customers start to ask more about green products and put more pressure on manufacturers, but the manufacturers will need to continue to support customers to go green and to decarbonise their product offerings. So this is the high level Make UK roadmap of how the manufacturing industry can get from where it is today to where it needs to be in 2050. I appreciate there's a lot of information to take in and there's a lot to think about, but in terms of breaking it down into the next steps that manufacturing businesses can take on the road to net zero, the suggestion is that each manufacturing company should develop their own net zero roadmap. So reading the Make UK roadmap will give you some ideas about what challenges you might need to focus on, where the opportunities are. But in terms of the practical steps to developing your own roadmap, you first need to be measuring your own scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So those are your operational emissions as well as your value chain emissions, so that you can work out your individual baseline. So Make UK have taken 2018 as the manufacturing baseline, but we would suggest doing a recent emissions inventory to work out what your latest baseline and footprint is. Once you've got your full footprint, you can start to identify which areas of your business are contributing the most emissions, and you can start to develop a decarbonisation plan, looking at practical things that you can implement to reduce your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So that may be anywhere from looking at energy efficiency initiatives, such as LED light bulbs, to installing your own low carbon electricity generation, so solar PV, for example, to looking at your scope 3 emissions and thinking about, for example, there greening up your business travel and your employee commuting. So you need to start to identify things that you can be doing to tackle your emissions. And also you should be looking at setting emission reduction targets. So it was great to see in the poll that a lot of people already have targets, and almost half, or I think it was almost half the group had targets, and a lot of them were aligned with the Make UK recommended commitments, which is fantastic. But we would recommend that all companies look at setting emission reduction targets that suit their business. Not everyone's going to have the same journey to net zero, and how fast or slow you want to decarbonize is really up to your business position. We would just say that net zero by 2050 is kind of the backstop one. So I would recommend either aligning with the Make UK commitments or more ambitious. And then announcing these targets to your customers, your supply chain, because what we are seeing from within our business is that more and more suppliers and customers are asking their providers, what are you doing in this space? So having this plan of action, having targets set, it's all going to be great for winning business in the future, and make sure you're future-proofing your business to be able to keep operating. So before I hand over to, I think we've got some case studies now, who have some members who've already started on their net zero journey. Happy to open up to a couple of questions from the floor just at this point.
You're getting off lightly, Tina.
There was a question in the chat to me that was just what is CCUS? So that's just carbon capture, utilization and storage. And apologies for using initializations without explaining what they are. That's the world of climate change. It's all alphabet soup, as we say.
I have one question. This is Alistair Higgins from All Good PLC. We're a manufacturer of architectural ironmongery, so lots of steel products. My question, probably quite a simple one. When you are calculating your target reductions, what are companies typically doing in terms of the baseline year that they use against which to calculate those targets?
Yes, it's a really good question, actually. Because of the added complication of COVID. So last year, what we were looking at a lot was when we've been doing people's scope 3 inventory, we've been looking at the most recent full year of data. So that's 2020. And it tends to be once people have a full footprint, they want to go ahead and set their targets. But 2020 isn't a completely accurate year of operations for most people. So we try and follow the guidance of the Science-Based Target Initiative. They say you can set a baseline as far back as 2015, but they do recommend trying to do a recent baseline year so that you've got a representative view of your business at the moment. So whether that be a 2019 baseline or a 2021 baseline. Alternatively, if your business wasn't hugely impacted during COVID times and you did carry on operating, depending on the sector, 2020 is fine too. Mm-hmm. Once you've got, if you're setting an official science-based target, as well as a baseline year, you need to show a recent, an inventory for a recent year, so no older than 2 years. So if you were going to take an older baseline year, so 2019 or prior, you would also have to have another inventory. Mm-hmm. So you've got the kind of 2 options there. You can do a recent inventory and have that as your baseline and your recent year, or you can take that older one and then you can already start to see progress. So. Okay,
thank you. You referred to some science-based guidelines there. Can you be a bit more specific, or maybe somebody could put a link to that on the
Yeah, of course. Apologies again, this is me dropping in acronyms. So SBTs are science-based targets. The Science-Based Targets Initiative is the international body for setting emission reduction targets and having them validated against the latest climate science. So there's a website which we can send you a link, and on that website they have a list of all the companies who have committed to setting emission reduction targets in line with the latest science, and they've had those validated. And the benefit of doing it officially through the Science-Based Target Initiative is that a lot of auditors, and when people are asking about emission reduction targets, SBTs are the recognized standard for setting science-based targets. And because you're on their website, it means you've got a lot of exposure. So there's almost that kind of holding thing. So it's all fine and well to set your own internal targets, but who's holding you account to those internal targets? Whereas when you set a target through the Science-Based Target Initiative, you're on their website, they publish an annual report showing everyone's progress. So there's that added rationale for trying to meet your targets because it's very public. But I can send a link, and if you, happy to speak a bit more about it offline.
No, that's great. That's very, very clear. Thanks, Christina. Thank you.
Perfect. I do see
more in the chat.
Yep. So there's one here from Caitlin. With the aim for net zero products, do you see that businesses will need to conduct life cycle analysis of individual products? How do you see this working? Another great question. Yes, definitely. Businesses will need to start conducting life cycle analysis of individual products. So a life cycle analysis of an individual product looks at the emissions produced from all stages of that product's life cycle. So from the extraction of the raw materials, any transportation of raw materials, any manufacturing and initial processing that goes on, further transportation. That would be called a cradle to gate life cycle assessment. And further to this, you can do a cradle to grave, which takes into account the use of the products. So only once these life cycle analysis have been conducted can you really start to track the emissions associated with a product and start to reduce them to reach net zero. Conducting life cycle analysis is also a really great marketing method as well. As products are being more and more considered based on their green credentials, if you've done a life cycle analysis of your product and you can compare this to an industry reference product and you can show the benefits of your product over another reference one, that's a really great marketing material that shows the green credentials. So yeah, it's a slightly complicated process, a life cycle assessment. It's basically mapping the emissions back through the value chain. And I don't like to plug Inspired, but it is something else that we can help people with if you're interested in talking about that further offline. I'll take one, David.
Hi there. Yeah, I've got a question regarding that. We've looked at this and started the process of mapping back the carbon emissions of our supply chain. I wondered if there was any move towards legislation on enforcing suppliers throughout the supply chain to do their carbon assessments, because as soon as that information hits a CE mark or a UKCA mark or a declaration of conformity or a sales technical data sheet, we can start to gather that information through the supply chain and drop it out to our customers. Yeah. But without that sort of legislative demand to do it, it's very, very difficult to get the engagement from the supply chain.
Yep, and it's a really good point. I will say that what we've seen at the moment is the government, if you're bidding on a government project over a certain amount, as part of their tender, they're asking for, it's called the PPN 0621 form, and they require people bidding on their products to report their scope 1 and 2 and 5 of the scope 3 categories. They also require bidders to have emission reduction targets, and they need to have demonstrated progress, basically. So that's something that's being rolled out to new government tenders, and the likes of the NHS have started to roll it out as well. And this is something that we recommend actually private companies can start to do as part of tenders, as part of invoices, start to ask for this data going forward. Companies of a certain size have to report their scope 1 and 2 emissions as part of something called SECR, so Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting. So a lot of companies should have their scope 1 and 2 emissions readily available. It looks like that reporting requirement will continue to be rolled out to different companies. So at least scope 1 and 2 should become readily available for everybody. Until that happens, though, it's a case of what we recommend is speaking to your supply chain, give them fair warning, just say next year we would, as part of invoices, we would like to start to see your scope 1 and 2 emissions. The year after that, we want to see your scope 1, 2, and 3. Maybe 5 years down the line, we want to start seeing product footprints for what we buy from you. And the NHS actually have a really good plan of action for this, of how they're going to engage with their suppliers, and it's a gradual rollout because the data is not readily available. So it is a gradual piece.
Apologies for that. Thank you for that. That was useful.
There's one more question in the chat, but it's a difficult one to answer. And what do you prioritize, life cycle assessments or scope 3? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one I would recommend. I think knowing your full value chain footprint, so your scope 3, is really important in identifying where you need to focus efforts to decarbonize going forward. So I would probably start with the scope 3 and then move on to looking at the life cycle assessment, because doing a life cycle assessment does build off your scope 3. For example, category 1, the embedded carbon in the goods and services you buy. So scope 3 kind of paves the way to do a life cycle assessment, but it's a difficult one. It depends what you're being asked for, what you've got the capacity to work on. I'll stop answering questions there. Anything else, please do follow up afterwards. Happy to have more chats, and I'll hand it back to Dan, who you can introduce our guests.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. And I know you've got to drop off at some point, so as Tina said, any questions, just fire them through to us at the end. If I can't field them, I'm sure I can try and catch Tina when she's free and get some answers back to people. So moving on to our user view section now. We've got 2 or 3 companies that have started their journey, albeit some are right at the beginning of their journey to net zero. We just really wanted to get them to share their views on arguably why it was important for them to start so soon, and what the perceived or realised values will be of committing to net zero at this stage. So I think first of all, could we introduce Robert Picard from LBBC Group?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Dan. Yes, it was an interesting session for the first half there, Tina, too. Thank you for that. The LBBC Group, we are a group of 4 engineering companies specialising in the design, manufacture and support and supply of pressure equipment, predominantly autoclaves. And we also carry out subcontract machining, subcontract fabrication for third-party customers. The markets that we supply into are typically the aerospace and defence markets. So some of our key customers, Rolls-Royce, for example, GE, Pratt & Whitney, BAE Systems, and then into the oil and gas and IGT markets too, of Jacobs and Tom Custer's groups, the big turbine blade manufacturers. And more recently, we've moved into the funeral sector, which is a bit of a departure for us, but it's using autoclave technology into the autoclave sector, into the funeral sector. The reasons we decided to embark on our net zero journey was firstly because, being a 5th generation family business, we always take a long-term view. Long-term sustainable profitable growth is our mantra, and we want the planet, and we want to do our bit to sustain the world for future generations. So it all aligns with us as a family and us and our values as a business. Secondly, our customer base, as has been mentioned, are becoming increasingly demanding and requiring some information on our journey towards net zero. So it was important for us to be ahead of the game there, so we're not playing catch up when those demands come through. And thirdly, as I touched on there, the product that we're supplying into the funeral sector is an environmentally friendly alternative to cremation. It's water cremation, which is a green process. And so it's critical from a business point of view that everything aligns with the green products that we're supplying. It would all be rather incongruent if we were a big emitter and trying to promote green products. Those are the key reasons that we decided to make a start. And so how we went about it, we got representatives from each of the 4 engineering companies that we have, and put a team together with our finance people to try and see how we're going to do it. And it soon became fairly evident that it's an absolute minefield. Well, no, actually, initially we went online and we found some carbon calculators, and one guy thought, oh, this is a breeze, we can do it ourselves, no problem. As we dug into it deeper, we soon realized that it was, as you've heard from all the acronyms and everything going on, it's a complex area that we're not experts in. It's not our field, and so we've looked around for people to support us along the way, and we did subsequently engage with Inspired, who we started working with them last year. the way that started was initially a training session where we got a familiarity amongst the team about what it's all about, all our scope 2, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, and how to go about making the savings as we start on our journey. And the first part of that was actually to do a benchmarking exercise, which has been suggested. So we used, because we were quite badly hit during COVID, we did take our 2019 year, and scope 1 and scope 2, that was fine, no problem getting that data ready. It was the scope 3 stuff that is still the challenge, and there's a lot more to go on that front, but we just got to make a start, and we keep working on it and progressing day by day. The next stage of the work with Inspired was to develop the roadmap for us specifically, and that was a good exercise that involved another workshop with the full team to sit back and see where we want to be and what targets we want to put in place, and then develop a strategy around that. And that's where we're at the moment. So we're wanting to try and engage a wider group of people across the business, as we find it's an easy conversation to have. It's a subject that is of interest to our staff. They're keen to be involved, and there's a lot of positivity coming around it. So with the work that we started with Inspired, we've made savings already on the CCL payment aspect. We've zero waste to landfill now, and we are getting this improved staff engagement. The wider strategy of moving things forward is that we want to leverage the work that we're doing from a marketing perspective. So throughout each of the 4 divisions, as and when we make progress in various areas along the journey, we'll be firing that out on social media, just to let the world out there know that we are on this journey, and we're committed to achieving our goals and our targets. The next phase, which is starting to get into the difficult bits, is actually making some significant energy savings, and that is going to be a challenge for us. But again, by engaging everybody in the business, there's no doubt that opportunities will come out of the woodwork there. We're looking at renewables perhaps, and Inspired did a proposal for us for looking at solar on top of the factory, which is probably something that we will be proceeding with, that will help us significantly there. As I say, then moving forward, we'll continue on the marketing opportunities that this produces and meeting the requirements of our customers. So we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of work to be done, but by engaging everybody in the business, we feel, rather than one individual, we feel it's something that as a group, we can make progress and achieve the targets that we want, that we set ourselves, again, along with the support of the Inspired team to help us get there. So that's the story of LBBC, of where we're at, and hopefully by 2030 we will have achieved what we're aiming to achieve. Thank you. If there's any questions that anybody wants to ask me, I'll see if I can offer any assistance. Otherwise, move on.
I think we'll leave the questions to the Q&A, or once all the 3 members, sorry, have said something. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Robert, would you like to? Oh, sorry. Richard, Gavin, excuse me, Gavin, would you like to come on,
yes.
please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Managing Director of Astley Signs. We supply branding, graphics, all sorts of signage right across the UK and into some parts of Europe. So we're working with a lot of blue chip clients throughout the UK. We deal with a lot of retailers such as Sainsbury's, Co-op, Asda, a lot of petroleum companies such as Texaco and Jet. So what we were finding was that a lot of our key clients were very much making commitments in terms of net zero, starting their own net zero journeys. And as part of that, there is an expectation that suppliers come along the journey with them. So we kind of wanted to make sure that we're ahead of the game and make sure we had that offer not only to existing clients but also to prospective clients, and be able to demonstrate that we are very much on that journey with them. And on top of that, we of course also wanted to look very much at our own impact on the environment, and what we could do to change how we operated. And I think the difficulty with looking at that ourselves was that we all had our own ideas about what to tackle, what we wanted to look at, what information we wanted to get and analyze, but everybody had their own thoughts and opinions about how to achieve this. And we would get different people knocking on the door saying, I can help you with this, I can put solar panels on your roof, I can do the other for you, but it all felt very disjointed. And we felt that we could be tackling one-off schemes and not getting the results that we wanted, not get the benefit we wanted. Everyone had their own opinions. So we were really struggling to work out how we take this journey forward. So it was great to kind of connect up with Inspired, because this seemed the obvious way forward to allow us to have a joined up approach to deliver a net zero program. We achieved ourselves zero waste to landfill, but it was what was next, how would we measure it, how would this be done accurately. So it was in a way a bit of a tough sell to the business, because you get the usual questions about how much is it going to cost us, what you're employing consultants, all these kind of questions. But I think as soon as people could start seeing the benefits to the wider business and to the clients, it turned into a no-brainer. And you know, as soon as you sort of feed this back to clients, you can immediately see, you know, them sit up and listen. And I think that one of the things that's really surprised us, you know, we're very much at the early stages of the process. We're very much just information gathering at this stage. We've set this as one of our key objectives for 2022, to get this process underway, to get the roadmap done and set up for the future, and something that we need to engage the whole business in. But what we have done in terms of communicating to our clients and starting to put out on social media that we're starting the journey, the response has been amazing. You know, we obviously monitor how many views we get of social media posts, what hits we get on the website. And of all the peaks that we've achieved through our social media posts over the last 6 months, the ones about net zero have been the highest. And that in return has created spikes in terms of hits on the website. So it is hugely emotive out there, and it's something that really people are looking at and wanting to know more about. And there's no doubt that it's very much a key part of our ongoing marketing and sales strategy. So from that point of view, you know, I think it's a key thing that a lot of businesses really do need to look at, purely from a sales point of view, regardless of their own improvements that they want to make in the business. We've obviously got a lot of work to do. One of our biggest challenges is going to be engaging with all the staff. Our initial meetings with Dan and his team have been brilliant. We were keen for him to come in, do face-to-face with the leadership team, so that we could really onboard them from day one. And one of the key things that we're looking forward to in the next couple of months is the workshops that we're looking to set up with the management team, because ultimately everybody's going to benefit from this, but we really need to make sure that we get absolute buy-in across the business so that we can deliver and achieve these targets that we've set out. So early stages for us, but even with those first few steps, we've found it hugely beneficial. It's focusing us in terms of a key objective for the business for the year, but also getting that out in front of clients and giving us a little bit of a USP in terms of our competitors and what our offer is to the clients. So very much looking forward to the journey this year and getting our roadmap set up. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Brilliant. And just to try and balance the scales and not make this come across as an inspired sales pitch, appreciate both of you, Robert and Gavin, have worked with us. Just to balance the scales, we've got Heather from BioD. I guess our only engagement so far, Heather, was sharing the stage at the annual award ceremony, where we were very pleased to announce that you were the winner of the category for energy and sustainability for last year, and all the work that you and the team have done internally, off your own back and on your own without, outside guidance. So over to you, and look forward to hearing what you've done and what you've benefited from so far.
Hello, so good afternoon, everyone. My name's Heather and I work for the BioD company. We manufacture eco-friendly cleaning products and we have been running for about 30 years. I think what's kind of unique to BioD is that whereas a lot of cleaning products are now trying to be green, we've been green from the very inception of the business. So the reason the company was started was because of a concern for the environment. And as we've traveled through the years, consumers have become more and more aware about ingredients. They want to know where they come from. They're very, very eco-conscious when they purchase our products. And it became very, very clear that we needed to report more to our customers, that they were kind of hungry for information. And that kind of led us to think about creating a sustainability report. And we knew that as part of that sustainability report, we needed to start also calculating our carbon footprint. So the first year that we did that was 2019, and we didn't know about Inspired then, better or for worse, I don't know, but we dealt with a local consultant, and she was lovely. She kind of held our hand the first year. She showed us how to kind of bring together the data that we needed to calculate our carbon footprint. So we looked at scope 1, we looked at scope 2, and then we looked at as much as we could of scope 3. And it was daunting. It was, I couldn't believe how much work was involved. But what I would say is that that first year was so instrumental in taking us forward, in helping us improve. So once we had that, the 2019 figures, we were actually able to then carry on measuring our carbon footprint in-house from what we learned from our consultant. And it's been really incredible. So just having those kind of initial figures for 2019, we then moved into 2020, which was obviously the start of the pandemic. So it wasn't a normal year for us. Our sales rocketed. It was hard to cope with the demand that came in. So we went from the turnover in 2019 and it dramatically increased for 2020. So it wasn't a kind of a like for like comparison really. And then last year we moved site. So again, we were kind of operating 2 sites. We had work carried out at the new site for about 6 months. So we kind of, it's been challenging to kind of measure year on year what our true carbon emissions are. But I mean, I think the incredible thing is that having that data, you can then analyze it, you can look at it, and it's just really getting started. That's the most difficult thing to do, is to start. But once you've started, and I'd fully recommend speaking to a consultant and getting their help, because they are the professionals, and then you can carry on. I think one thing I would say about involving staff, we have got to the point now where we've been, we're now on our 3rd sustainability report, our 3rd year, and we've actually introduced a sustainability award. So it's a monthly award, and we invite staff to bring forward a new sustainability idea, and then the best idea, they get rewarded for that. So different types of awards are literally an extra day's holiday. So we're really trying to work with staff. We're trying to make them think of ways where we can be more sustainable as a company, where we, from very small suggestions to quite big suggestions, we want them all in. We want to get them involved. We want to reward them for thinking that way. And that's been a really valuable part of kind of trying to bring the team together and trying to move it forward. We've also created a sustainability team. So we're just about to have a 2nd meeting for that. And again, it's about bringing members in from each department so that we can bring in that kind of change of kind of mindset across the business, so that all areas are thinking about being sustainable, all areas thinking about how we can reduce our carbon emissions. it was a hugely proud moment to accept the regional and then the winner of the Energy and Sustainability Award. Absolutely surreal. Didn't expect to be taking that home. So we were just absolutely over the moon with that. The team as well. I mean, I was so happy to bring it back for them. They were all very enthused. So a huge thank you to Make UK for helping us celebrate the successes that we do enjoy as businesses. So yeah, I get very enthused about saving carbon emissions. Last year, as I said, we moved site. Our existing site was proving unfit for purpose in many ways. And one of the areas which we knew we could never improve on was our electricity and our gas supply. The landlord wouldn't permit solar panels. So we actually moved site to a site on an environmental tech park with solar panels. So even looking at all the extra carbon emissions last year from all the extra energy usage from having all the work done on the new site and the move, we're still looking at a saving last year from the previous year of 21% of electricity. And bearing in mind that we didn't fully start operating until September, October in the year, it just shows what a massive impact it's had to bring in solar energy. We've also installed an electric boiler, so we're not reliant on any gas supply. We were concerned about gas being a very unsustainable supply, an energy source. So our heating is run from the solar panels as well. And although we don't get all of our energy input from the solar, a good percentage of it is coming from there. And it's a massive step forward in our sustainability journey, and it was a hugely exciting time for us. So it's just about making those goals. We like to report publicly what we're doing. It holds us accountable, it makes us responsible, it makes us drive towards those goals. So we're part of Net Zero, part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we're part of Terra Carta, and we also just joined a new scheme in Hull called Oh Yes. So very pleased to be part of that journey too. So thank you, Dan.
Brilliant, thanks Heather, thanks for sharing that. And I guess of the rest of the attendees today, there might be a new winner next year, maybe. Let's hope your what the three of you have managed to achieve and look to achieve is encouraging some potential future winners. Right, back on. I think Brigitte, we've got the next poll.
Yep, we have got now 2 polls to run. Big ones. So Annette, I don't know. Yes, good. So that's the first one. Where are you now? So has your company established any emission reduction or decarbonization commitments? Sorry, that is not the right one. I'm reading. Yeah, this is the right one now. Sorry. Drivers and challenges. So what is your key driver for decarbonizing your business? Is it customer pressure, supplier pressure, investor pressure, rising costs, employees, doing the right thing, compliance? I'll let you read it all. And then the second one is on challenges.
Yeah, we ran this similar type of poll during the engagement workshops last year when creating the carbon footprint and creating the roadmap. We really wanted to just, I guess, do a temperature check again, albeit a smaller group of people, but just wanted to see how those numbers stacked up. Already my beliefs are coming true on that. So I think just whilst people are finishing off answering on that, the last year's numbers, 51% of people that voted said it was due to customer pressure. Business expectation. 42% of people that voted said it was customer pressure, and only 26% said compliance. But everyone that voted said that one of the key drivers for them around net zero was to avoid or reduce energy and transport costs. So it'd be interesting to see how those dials have moved now. we've actually added a few more dials in. So customer pressure, half of you that have voted have said it's due to customer pressure. Someone's just chucked a last minute vote in there and made it 49%. Could someone else vote and put it back up to 50?
I'll end the polling now. It's stopped, so bear with me, Dan.
Yeah.
Quite interestingly as well, supplier pressure is 3 of the votes. So it'd be interesting to know how your suppliers are actually applying pressure. We generally see it from a customer perspective, not from the other way around. 20% have got investor pressure. Only 24% have got the driver of rising costs. 5%, 2 of the people have said it's around their employees' sensitivity to change as a driver for them, which is quite interesting to see that the teams or the groups and the people within your organisation are actually one of the main drivers. 81% have said doing the right thing, of course. Just under half have said compliance now, whereas it was 26%. So yeah, it'd be we'll obviously feed back to you the full results. We'll move on to the challenges question now in the poll.
Can you scroll down? Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's not coming through on our screens yet.
Okay, I'll talk you through it then. So key challenges, we've got rising costs of energy.
Scroll down on your screen.
Yeah, 30.
Just go down.
Yeah, can everybody see that, or do you want me to go over it?
I think it's interesting to see most people, 60% nearly want to, oops, it's gone back down. Want to decarbonize their supply chain. Would be interesting to know. Well, that's the challenge clearly. And then the rising costs of energy, 35%. And remaining cost compensation. So I don't think there's much surprise there. I mean, Dan, I don't know if you.
Half people want to remain cost competitive, and that's one of the biggest challenges. Supply chain, another big one for the votes, and then rising energy costs, meaning that fuel switching is becoming a big challenge. Interesting what Heather said there from BioD about solar. I'm sure that having solar on your roof and generating that renewably not only helped you from a carbon perspective, but also avoiding all of the chaos that's ensued thanks to Putin recently.
There's quite a few. Sorry, Dan, carry on.
Okay, so being conscious of time,
Yep.
I will crack on and start sharing my screen again. Hopefully this works. Technology's not let me down so far today. Does want to click the wrong button now. Okay, so for the final, I guess, informative session today, we wanted to give people a bit of an idea of how to start your journey. I think for the regulars to these events, we've done to death now how to start and create your carbon footprint and what goes into that. The feedback I've been getting from speaking to a lot of the members and in the working groups is once we've measured, where do we go from there and how do we take the next steps? So, of course, I've got to recap and say that the first point is to understand your greenhouse gas emissions, where they come from, and making sure that you're aware it's not just carbon. When you're measuring your emissions in total, it can come from a number of different sources, although carbon dioxide is one of the most regular and most easier to measure. There are other contributors that contribute to global warming. So as we've done on previous sessions, you will start by creating your footprint, measuring your emissions, understanding where they come from that are relevant to your business. Scope 1 and 2 are the most popular and arguably the most easy to start to manage. But as Tina said on her session just before, in order to make a commitment to net zero, you do need to be measuring your full supply and value chain of emissions. So Scope 3 is certainly the next step that people need to move from if you've already started measuring your Scope 1 and 2 emissions. If anyone's unsure of how you start that, we've got a lot of available videos that you can watch whenever you want. I'm sure we'll be sharing links and providing a bit of information on that, but I don't want to go back over stuff that we've already covered. Want to move on to the next bit. So, setting up your net zero strategy and the process that arguably we'd recommend people take is, first of all, calculate what needs to be measured and categorise to make sure that you're not double counting across those different scopes or categories of emissions. Figure out what data you have currently and whether that data can be improved on from its accuracy, its frequency in which you receive it, and whether you can, create some kind of central location that captures all that information. And then build your strategy. So measure your footprint, create your line in the sand, so to speak, and your baseline. Then understand what opportunities you have within your business premises or your supply chain to then reduce those emissions. That could be through a site survey. It could be through, using the knowledge of your boots on the ground, so to speak, within your business already. Then, as Robert said from LBBC, getting a workshop together of the right people in the room, really hashing out your plan, understanding your main drivers and your challenges, and figuring out what your aspirations are, looking at, maybe what some of your competitors are doing or your customer pressure is. And that should really help not only drive engagement, but also make sure that your plan's going to be relevant for its purpose. And then set your target and strategy and get on with it, get the work done and start implementing all of the plans that you've put in place. So going into a bit more detail on each of those, just some, I guess, quick pointers, which most of you may already be aware of. When you want to understand your opportunities, these could comprise of, and some reasonably quick wins, doing an energy audit, whether that's internal or using external support, to understand how you can reduce, how you can become more efficient. I would almost guarantee that most people have looked at LED lighting if they haven't already, but if you haven't, get on with it, because the payback should be about a year and a half return on investment. And it will, certainly for operations that have got big open spaces and are currently on halogen bulbs, you need to be moving to LED. It'll have a significant cost saving, but also it will contribute to your CO2 reduction. You may want to start looking at what renewable energy you can create yourself or generate on site, and whether then there's an opportunity to switch away from any gas where it's used for heating. Arguably, it's a bit harder when it's used as part of an industrial process, but if you can put solar on the roof and maybe put air source heat pumps in place, electrify your heating, and then green the supplies to that, you've made a massive dent in your carbon footprint thereafter. It seems quite obvious, but with your supply contract renewals, when they come up for renewal, make sure that suppliers are putting in offers that are truly green and not just renewable. One key point that people get caught out on with green energy and green supply contracts is that biomass and nuclear are technically renewable, but not necessarily green. There's an inherent carbon footprint associated with chopping trees down in Canada, shipping them halfway around the world, and then burning them in the UK to generate electricity. But unfortunately, some suppliers do label their biomass generation mix as green supply, and they will charge you a little premium to buy that. But actually, when it comes to measuring your footprint, you'll start to realise that actually the carbon footprint associated with that's not too dissimilar to if you bought a normal mix, a grid mix contract where we're burning gas to generate electricity. So just be conscious of that. I think the abbreviation to look out for is REGO. That's Renewable Energy Generation Origin Certificate. And that essentially certifies that the power that you're supplied by, providing you've not generated it on your roof, of course, is from a renewable green source, and that'll be wind, solar, or hydro. Within your scope 1 and 2 emissions, you'll have your transport. So can you start encouraging your staff to make decisions if it's their own personal cars around electric vehicles? Within your company car fleet, when those renewals come up for any leases, or if you've bought them, can you look at switching them out for hybrids or electric vehicles? Some businesses may wish to look at some carbon offsetting. So maybe your gas supply is used for an industrial process there's no other alternative out there right now. You may want to look at some carbon offsets and what impact that would have, but also what cost that would have to purchase those offsets. And then looking at your when you start measuring your scope 3, how you can engage your suppliers and your customers in potentially improving the footprint, whether it be product design or sourcing alternative raw materials. When you set up your workshop, generally we encourage you to get the right people in the room. It's really important for the ongoing engagement, but also the information that you glean out of that session, that you've got someone from finance, because arguably net zero is going to cost some money, and you're going to need someone in there that can not only consider future budgets for future financial years, but understand what's available within current budget terms. Ideally, you'll have someone from your procurement function. If that is a different person to finance, appreciate many of the attendees are SMEs, and there's not necessarily a procurement or a finance function. It's one person wearing many hats. But arguably, procurement function would be in the room to look at whether you source renewable contracts in your future supply agreements, how you then engage with customers. So I guess a direct buyer might be interested in how you can engage with suppliers for raw materials, indirects obviously sourcing services, and then what the potential for offsets would be, and what information that your procurement team may already have, or procurement person. You'll want marketing and customer facing in there. So marketing and customer facing can really be the voice of your customer or the voice of your market space, and add a lot of value in the conversation and the workshop to feed back to you what kind of pressure or conversations your customers are having with you, but also certainly your customer facing teams where they may have come up against a competitor who has used their net zero commitment as an advantage already, or just understanding what else is out there in the market space. And then arguably health and safety. If you're a business that's large enough to be captured by compliance, you need to know where your energy and carbon compliance fits in your broader net zero approach. And any environmental permits that you might have, they'll have to be considered as part of your broader net zero approach. From our experience, those workshops generally take half a day, 3-4 hours. When you've got the right people in the room, I'm not saying you have to use us, you can do that yourself. The purpose of this session really is to help you understand, the process that you can go through. But it's really important that you get the right people in the room and get all of that information gleaned out of the conversations that you have. Then you want to start considering the scope and ambition of your strategy. So once you've got all of that information, you've measured your footprint, you've done your workshop, and you've understood what opportunities there are, then it's figuring out what you can commit to. Certainly if it's going to be a public commitment, you don't want to necessarily tie your own noose and hang yourself in a couple of years' time if it's a bit too aspirational and you've not got the substance behind that to actually achieve your target or your aspiration. As Tina said earlier, UK government have committed to net zero by 2050. That's been mandated. So I guess there's your worst case scenario or backstop. Many businesses would want to align to their trade federation. So I know food and drink, and I think chemicals and a couple of others have made their own sector specific commitments that you may want to align to. or it may be a customer driven alignment. So one of your customers might have committed to net zero by a certain timeline, and arguably if they're a key customer and a big percentage of your revenue, then you might want to align to them to make sure that you continue servicing them in the future. Then you need to start figuring out as well what kind of challenges you're going to be facing or what hurdles you might come across. So one of these things will be your employees. Arguably one of the most important parts of developing and delivering a net zero strategy is making sure you bring people along on your journey. And if your staff don't have the awareness to begin with, but also I'm trying to be careful how I communicate this, but in an older workforce, there's not as much sensitivity to change. There's maybe not as much awareness, there's maybe not as much willing on the whole. And I'm being very careful how I communicate this, but one thing that we have seen, and certainly from sitting on the regional advisory board to Make UK, is that the younger workforce coming in now are a lot more environmentally sensitive. They're a lot more aware of their impact on the environment, but also they want to work for a company that has its own plan and is trying to limit its impact on the environment. So not only is it good for engagement, it might also help you attract some new talent in the future. You've got to consider what kind of processes that you're conducting on site and whether there's any limitations around that from a fuel switching perspective, what alternative technologies are out there, what kind of conflicting roles and objectives will there be. So very general, a finance person might want to minimize cost where possible and budget securely, whereas procurement might want to drive the cost down as much as possible. And health and safety want to make sure that things are compliant and everyone's safe. Sometimes those objectives can conflict, so it's definitely worth having a look at what objectives are set for the staff that are going to be engaged in this project, and making sure that there's no butting of heads or crossover of objectives that ultimately slows progress down. And then, of course, engaging with customers and suppliers to understand what kind of pressure they're applying, or where suppliers may be able to support you as well on your journey, and then getting your engagement to push forward. Generally, when we set targets for people, we look at modelling different scenarios. So, for example, you might say, if we go to net zero by 2050, what kind of investment are we going to have to put into the business, and what will that look like? And what's our approach going to be? Whereas if actually our customer wants us to be net zero by 2040, like they've committed, what would that scenario look like, and how much more revenue would I have to put in? Investment would I have to put into my business, and what other actions am I going to have to take therefore to achieve that? And we mentioned science-based targets earlier. So what would a science-based target scenario look like for your organisation? What milestones would you have to hit in order to align to that science-based target, and therefore what expectation of investment would there be in order for you to align to that different scenario? Inspired as a company have made our own commitments. We've got our own targets, so we want to be net zero by 2035. We're in line with the 1.5 degree pathway, which is aligned to science. As a stopgap and one of our milestones along that journey, we've committed to be carbon neutral from 2020 for all consumption related emissions. So we've gone out there and bought offsets through carbon sequestration, which is tree planting, posh word for tree planting. Whilst carbon offsets can be portrayed in a negative light, as an organisation, our scope 1 and 2 emissions are very small, and where we've greened the supplies and where we're in control of our buildings and they're not landlords, where we can remove fossil fuels, inevitably the remaining part of our scope 1 and 2 emissions are for our transportation, and some of that is unavoidable. So our chief exec decided that by offsetting, yes, it achieves carbon neutrality and it supports on our journey to net zero, but it also now puts a line item in our budget for what our carbon offset bill will be each year. And ideally now he's got to stick to manage us all against, or a line item in that budget to say, how do we drive that budget down for those offsets? And that's through efficiency and alternative fuels and alternative journeys and transport routes. So I guess it's a slightly different way of doing things. Appreciate our scope 1 and 2 emissions are vastly different to a manufacturer. We're a consultancy where most of us are based from home. We have limited office use, but there is still an inherent footprint associated with our operation. So that was our approach. Moving on to how we can help. Many of you will have heard about the Net Zero Toolkit. It's available through Make UK online. You can download, I guess, the brochure of it. But very briefly, we help our customers to measure their footprint so we can look after scope 1, 2 and 3. That helps you define your baseline and your starting point. We then help you understand what your opportunities are and plan what those opportunities could look like and when you should be implementing them. So as Robert and Gavin have mentioned, we can come out and do some site surveys to identify those opportunities. You can then develop your strategy following a workshop, the engagement workshop, to understand, your main drivers and any challenges that you're going to be facing, what's achievable and by when, and what kind of funding or grants are available as part of that. We also consider what customer pressure there is, but also what competitive advantage there will be. So we look at some competitor analysis and understand what your customers are aligning to. Then we help you implement it. So whether it be putting solar panels on the roof or behavioural training or awareness training within your staff, we're there to support. And then we provide ongoing tracking and reporting. So we keep your carbon footprint maintained and updated. We report on that as frequently as you wish, so that you can track the performance of the actions that have taken. You can realise the benefit of the actions that have been taken, and that then really provides some confidence in taking further action in the future. Moving on to questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, I was just saying, so yeah, we have a few minutes for the Q&A.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If there are any questions.
I
don't think that maybe everyone's shy. Either that or I've got off really lightly.
Can't see anyone in the chat. No questions? Okay.
Good.
Very good.
Everyone's gone to sleep.
Sorry, and
Brigitte, do you just want to quickly outline how?
Yes, exactly. So if we can go on to the next slides, please.
Coming up.
So yeah, in the meantime, so clearly Make UK is doing a lot of things. So the first thing is what we're doing right now is to ensure our members understand the importance of getting started with the transition to net zero. So we're putting up events as much as we possibly can, and also talking to at our meetings, producing articles and so on. And we have also set a net zero framework, which is consists of a set of guiding principles. So I would also advise you to have a look. It could inspire you as well. It's about measuring and being in line with science, 1.5 degrees, collaborating with others, etc. So there are four main principles. It's very simple and hopefully inspiring. Then of course we have the roadmap, which we're just launching now, and a lot of awareness building and training, which the toolkit is part of, that Dan has introduced. And we also have our health and safety and sustainability team who provide training designed to equip all levels of the workforce with the knowledge and skills to help you achieve your environment and sustainability goals. And they have IEMA, Institute of Environmental Management, accredited courses that help you to implement your net zero strategy and factor in the Environmental Act 2021. So the first, and we'll go on to that just later. Then we have also, for those who are just starting, and for those who have maybe employee engagement, it can be quite perhaps useful. We produced a series of demystifying net zero workshops last year, and we have now reduced those to 15 minutes session of YouTubes, yes, so 5 of those. So that's quite nice to look at in your own time. And finally, we're also preparing a guide to net zero, which will be a guide of resources, pointing you to the different resources that exist. And of course, we're encouraging all our members to commit either, to net zero by 2050, and also to net zero by 2030. That was, we're still using the official UK Race to Zero channel with the SME Climate Hub, which is specifically for SMEs and very flexible. So I encourage you as well to look at that. Some of our members have done that, and we as Make UK have also committed to that, which is great. So we're on our way as well. And of course, we do a lot of policy and active advocacy to support our members. So right now we're really looking at energy prices and supply, of course, but there is a lot. We're working with the base on their decarbonization strategy on hydrogen. We're working with the carbon capture and usage and storage council and so on. So if you have any concerns, please do feed them back to us. It's really important for us to know your views on whichever topic, your challenges, your views. If you have something really specific, we do then really feed that in to the government and try and find some solutions for you. And one of these examples is that they have finally implemented a business rate relief for building improvements, which include installation and also solar panels, so that many of you have been asking for and saying the business rates increase when we do this. Well, now no longer. I think it's going to be from, is it next year? 2023, so not too helpful. And with the energy crisis, we're asking government, please do it from this year. So this is the sort of thing that we do, and government often listens to us, I must say. So next slide, Dan, please. So that is the course, the first course. It was highlighted by our members just to say how important the leadership was to get all this started. And so this is, leading with environmental sustainability. It's a 6-hour, so a whole day workshop, but really worthwhile getting into that as well. And finally, and we're just on time, so I just want to finish here. And let's go on to our poll quickly. So we have just 2 questions on whether you want to help. So that's great, Dan. Great for us as Make UK, so it's good. So as I said, please do feed us in. 77% of you would like more information. So we will be sending the links and as much as we can after this event. Links to the resources, to this toolkit, to the roadmap, etc. And then Dan, I guess you can be quite happy because half of you would like to have a free charge consultation. So yeah, that's great. And with that, I think, unless you want to add anything, Dan, but I think we should close given the time. And I just want to thank, just want to thank everybody for their time, and particularly to BioD and our members with their fantastic stories, and hopefully they've inspired others to get started, and also to thank Dan and Christina, who's gone, for their contribution. So again, thank you very much for today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I've just dropped our email inbox in the chat. If anyone does think of a question afterwards, you know, there's no obligation, but we're happy to try and answer any questions that come up. So feel free to get in touch and we'll pick that up.
And with us here, but you will get all this after the event. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.